Hello, and thank you for joining Melanated Mondays, a special Juneteenth edition brought to you by Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop. If this is your first time joining us, Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop, or BRTW as we call it in short, exists to disrupt any and all oppressive systems that marginalize Black people, using narrative and performance as a methodology to recenter Black people and experiences. With economic, social, educational, healthcare, housing, and political injustice facing our community, BRTW aims to tackle the issues that impact us while becoming a beacon for Black opportunity within the arts. Melanated Mondays is one of the ways that we live that mission. It is a monthly writing and performance salon highlighting a different theme at the intersection of Black justice and civic engagement. And this programming was made possible in part with support from the Brooklyn Arts Council, the Alliance of Resident Theaters New York, and the support of our community and the Howard Gilman Fund. This month's theme is 10 Years and Freedom. Trayvon Martin was killed in 2012. This year's Juneteenth conversation focuses on how the struggle for liberation has evolved over the past decade. And in all the ways that we work, we try to look at expansive definitions of struggle, liberation, revolution, etc. Apologies for the timer going off in the background. Tonight's speaker is Fayola Fair. Fayola is a 23-year-old queer non-binary Black book nerd, educator, and community organizer from Jamaica, Queens, who works to center and uplift Blackness in all iterations: Black people, Black communities, Black joy, Black struggles, Black knowledge, and Black liberation. She recently completed her master's degree in education, specifically the teaching of social studies at Teachers College, Columbia University. Fayola is currently a high school social studies teacher in New York City. In the long term, Fayola is interested in opening an independent bookstore and community space. Outside of their studies, they are the curator of the Reading for Black Lives Project, a member of the South Queens Women's March, and the creator of the Black Grads Link Up. Overall, their goal is to support our learning and to sustain our liberation. I also want to shout out our amazing lineup this evening. We have Spilt Milk by Sergey Burbank, Carbon Footprint by Tim Craig, and Crack the Door for Some Air by Dr. Mary Weems. And as we transition into our first piece, I also want to thank our amazing actors this evening. We have Tim Craig and Mia Kogavia, who are not only powerful actors in their own right, but also artistic producers with me at BRTW, the people behind the scenes who are writing grants and crunching numbers and putting together budgets and cultivating board members and doing all of the work necessary to make an organization run. I also want to welcome Equiano Mazzieri, who I believe is joining us for the first time as an actor. We are always thrilled to welcome new, vibrant, talented Black people into the fold. We're so excited to have you. As always, we have live stream producer Kira DeCoudre making sure that you can see this, making sure that everything gets posted in a timely fashion, just doing amazing work. And our new line producer, Dena Augusti. Thank you all for sharing your time, your creativity, and your talents. We recognize that you could be taking your talents anywhere in the world, and we are so grateful that you are sharing them with us. Going into our first piece, it is Spilt Milk by Sergey Burbank, read by Mia Kogavia as Eve, Tim Craig as Adam, and me, reading stage directions. Interior, kitchen, morning, a charged silence while an egg timer ticks. Adam opens a milk carton, sniffs, winces, and angrily places it in the sink. He glances over his shoulder. At the kitchen table, Eve picks up on the glance.
What?
Adam gestures to the milk carton.
That's my fault? I didn't make it go sour. I'm not a witch.
Jury's out on that.
Eve throws an orange at Adam's head.
Oh!
Take it back.
Not until I've had my coffee.
Then drink your coffee.
There's no milk.
And whose fault is that?
Yours.
Just drink your coffee without milk. Are you that much of a child?
Take that back.
Not until you've had your coffee.
It was your turn.
It takes you 2 seconds. It takes me a doctor's visit.
What?
Wait, what are you talking about?
Adam mutely holds up the milk carton.
Oh my God, will you pour it out? Don't leave it there.
And you're going to criticize everything I do, down to how I throw out my trash? I can't take a lifetime of this.
Eve jumps up from the table and crosses to Adam, gets in his face.
What are you saying?
Nothing.
If there ever was a moment, this is the moment. So tell me now.
A moment for what?
To change things. Change the course of events.
What are you saying?
What are you saying?
Nothing.
Then nothing.
A charged moment, and then Eve relents. She rests her head on his shoulder, and the contact makes him melt in turn.
I'm sorry. I should have gotten more milk.
I'm sorry too. You're not a witch.
I'm not?
You're the good kind.
Better.
A warm moment of reconciliation.
You're right.
What was that?
You're right. I'm sorry. It takes 2 seconds. We shouldn't have to take turns.
Are you sorry?
Yes. Yes, really.
Because I'm not sure that I am.
Oh. Oh. Oh.
They both look at the kitchen table, on which lies the open box for a home pregnancy kit. The egg timer goes off. They jump. Adam and Eve edge toward the table as one to look. They see the kitchen. They see the screen. They react. End of scene. Thank you to our wonderful performers, Tim Craig and Miyako Gavia, and the piece Spilt Milk by Sergey Burbank. Next up, we have a piece by our very own Tim Craig, and I will confess it's one of my favorites. It's called Carbon Footprint. We have Equiano Mazzieri reading Delaware, Tim Craig reading Juan, Miyako Gavia reading Shan, and yours truly reading Stage Directions. Two people posted on the block, any block, both with a pristine pair of Jordan 1s on their feet.
Yo, what's good, son?
Shit, trying to get on my Kaepernick so I can capitalize. You feel me?
I feel you. I feel you.
I can see you holding it down.
Gestures towards the footwear.
Oh, just a little light work. You know, I'm trying to lead everybody out of the darkness. You heard?
I feel you. These OG ones are the hardest I've seen beat down in a minute. Why are they extra fresh though? The re-release won't drop till next month.
Life is but a dream.
I ain't mad at you.
You ain't bumming for a change, I see.
Yeah, it's about that time for my infrared to scorch earth. I got them on the re-release. You all ready?
Oh yeah, I got the Black Cats in the mail today. I think by 2024, I might break them out.
Oh yeah, that'll be the year.
A bit.
I just got the True Blues.
Ooh, yeah, the Olive 13s is sitting in my corridor right now.
The joints with the snake skin.
Bruh.
Just caught the OG Jim Reds. I'm loving it.
Yeah, you good, bro? Yeah. You know, the Gatorades is sitting, just came through yesterday.
The Gatorade. I got my course last week, so I'm straight.
Oh, come on. You already know I got the Orlando Grays, the Space Jams, and the Win Like 96s.
The Turbo Greens.
Damn.
I got the Platinum Tints.
I got the Candy Canes.
I caught the Guava Ices.
The Chlorophyll is sitting in my Nike cart right now.
Juan pulls out his phone.
I got my Tinkers on layaway. Rewrite.
The Crimson Tints just got added to my collection.
I got the Masters, the Bordeaux, and the unks.
Ooh, I got the pure monies. I got the take flights, the golden harvest. You can't touch me.
I just copped the renewable bamboo laced 13s.
The renewable what?
Damn, you out here in the Stone Age, Mr. Flintstone. I hope you ain't driving your car with your unsustainable J's too. They're gonna go quick.
The retro 13s with the bamboo laces.
Bamboo laces?
Yeah. Bamboo laces, homie. Oh, you ain't got the bamboo lace 13s. Damn, brother. And you out here raising two youngins. When you know better, you do better.
Nah, man, it ain't like that.
You disturbing the peace with all that polyurethane on your soles, bro.
I am on my sustainability. I got the cap and gowns at the crib with the industrial hemp tips.
Oh, word. What about the black cements with the wool straps?
How about this South Beach colorway with soy cashmere? Soy cashmere!
Ooh. You know how these J's got on my feet and got to you? Wind. Straight wind, homie. Wind forms through eco-CO2 processing. Get off the plantations. Ain't no carbon footprint on my footprint, homie.
Ooh, that's hard. Thank you, Mother Earth.
Feel me?
Juan in Delaware sees Sean walking down the block with a fresh pair of Jordans and a bottle of water in hand.
Yo, where'd you get that from?
What? This bottle of water?
Blackout. Thank you to our wonderful performers, Equiana Mazzieri, Miyako Gavia, and Tim Craig in Tim Craig's Carbon Footprint. Our last piece of the evening is from someone who's actually never had their work shared with Melanated Mondays before. So we're very excited to have a piece by Dr. Mary Weems. This piece is called Crack the Door Open for Some Air. We have Mama read by Miyako, Tamara read by Tim, Jeff read by Equiano. I will be reading stage directions, and this selection comes from Act 2, Scene 5. It's after 10 p.m. the same day. As far as Mumia's aunt and grandmother are concerned, he hasn't been home, and they sit at the dining table talking and calling folks to see if he's there.
Hello? Hello? Oh, hi. Yes, Miss Robinson. This is Mamiya's grandmother. Is he there? No? Well, have you seen him at all today? What? Sorry to scream in your ear. It's just that Mamiya is rarely late, and he usually lets me know if he's going to be because he knows I worry. And if you left there around 5 o'clock, it's almost 9 o'clock now, and I'm scared. Yes, I know, Mrs. Robinson. Our kids can be thoughtless sometime. Yes, I know you're closing. Please add my grandson to your prayers tonight. Okay. Thanks, Mrs. Robinson. Good night.
Mama, before we start to panic, let me try calling him. He keeps the phone with him like it's an extension of his arm.
Tamara dials Mummy's number. It immediately rolls over to voicemail, and she realizes he's turned it off.
TT, what happened?
Tamara quickly walks over to her and reaches for her hand. They sit together, praying silently with their eyes closed for a few moments.
His phone is turned off, Mama. I gave it to God. I can't let myself think that anything's happened to Mommy.
Me either. And I gave it to God too, but I think we need to give God a hand. Call Jeff and tell him what's going on. TT, have him meet us here so we can figure out the best way to find Mummy.
Tamara dials Jeff's number on her cell phone.
Jeff, baby, I need you. Mommy's missing and he hasn't been in the house by his curfew. Yeah, I did try to call him. His phone's off. We've called Mrs. Robinson, the desk clerk at the library he's always talking to. That's where he's supposed to go after school today. And we've already called Mr. Wilson at the community center and a few of his friends he has. Nobody but Miss Robinson is seeing him. Okay, well, we'll be here waiting. Please hurry.
Let's go upstairs and look in his room while we wait. Maybe we'll find something to help us figure this out.
A few moments later in Mumia's room, they both moved to different parts, looking under his bed at some of the books in the overloaded bookcase against the wall, etc.
Have you ever seen a boy's room look this neat in your life?
That must be your first time in Mummy's room.
It is. What would I be in his room for? Like most teenage boys I'd ever known, including my brother, his daddy, they'd never want us in their rooms.
So true, TT. A lot of grown men feel that way too.
Including Jeff, but
Nobody's man cave is safe.
anyway, a room this neat is both good and bad news.
What do you mean?
Good news because I'm glad Mommy's developed good housekeeping habits, and bad news because there's no junk or mess anywhere to look under.
What about all of these books? What's he been reading?
According to his bookcase, he's been reading almost nothing but the books on how to get better at his two favorite online games, Fortnite and chess.
Really? That's it?
Yeah, along with a few classes, of course. Autobiography of Malcolm X, Miseducation of the Negro, and The Bluest Eye.
Funny how your eyes zeroed in on the 3 books you gave him for his birthday, which also happen to be 3 of your all-time favorites.
Exactly. Nice to see he still has them. I'm impressed.
Bottom line, I don't see anything in here to worry me in the least. Let's go back downstairs and wait for Jeff.
Okay, maybe somebody will call back while we're waiting.
They start walking down the steps and the doorbell rings. Tamara answers the door as Mama stands waiting.
Yeah, damn. You got here fast. Thanks, baby.
What's going on? Where's Mommy? Has anyone heard from him yet? Have you called the police? Have you been out looking?
Jeff, calm down, baby. Take a breath. Come on. Let's get you a drink.
Oh, the last thing I want right now is a drink. Just tell me what happened, so we can find your nephew.
And my
grandson. I'm so glad you're here. Now hurry up and tell him what we know, TT. Time is wasting.
Jeff, there's not much to tell. Mommy didn't come home from school. Mommy called the library just before closing and spoke to Mrs. Robinson, who said that she'd seen him leave the library around 5 o'clock.
End of scene. Thank you to our fabulous performers, Tim Craig, Miyako Gavia, Equiana Mazzieri, and thank you to Dr. Mary Weems. We're going to pause for a moment as we transition to our community conversation. Thanks again to our wonderful artists. We are now transitioning into the community conversation. Before we do so, I also want to thank our donors who are supporting Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop and all of our work. If you would like to join that vibrant community of people, you can support us for as little as $1, and it makes a world of difference for us. You can support us on Venmo at the BRTW, on PayPal at the BRTW, on our website, thebrtw.org/support. And we're also fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas. So if you would like to write off your donation to us, that is the best way to donate to Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop. We are also on the social medias, on Instagram and Twitter at the BRTW, and on Facebook at Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop. And Miyako, I feel like I forgot something. Where else are we on the great?
We're also on Patreon at Black Revolutionary Media.
Oh, that's a perfect reminder that we also have a podcast. And thank you to the people who listen, and we never promote this thing. Y'all are wonderful. I don't know how you find it. We're on all of the podcatchers at Black Revolutionary Media. It is where all of our Revolution Now cohort members' audio dramas are produced, and we share a number of dramatic works there. But I'm very happy to lead this transition into introducing our community speaker, Fayola Fair. We're so grateful to Fayola for joining us for this month's Melanated Monday. Thank you so much, Fayola, for your time. Alongside being an educator, Fayola is the curator of the Reading for Black Lives Project, a member of the South Queens Women's March, and creator of the Black Grads Link Up. Fayola, feel invited to add on to your bio and share a little bit more about yourself.
Cool. Hey y'all, my name is Fayola. I use she, they pronouns. I am a native New Yorker. I'm from Jamaica, Queens. I am an avid reader. I'm a biker. I'm a baker. And overall concerned citizen working to address the structures that oppress us and that be in our society currently, but are not inherent to the world that we live in. So yeah, thank you all for having me and for creating the space.
Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for sharing your time and your expertise and your creativity with us this evening. Going right into our community conversation, you emphasize the importance of learning in sustaining liberation. Can you tell us what forms of learning are necessary and to what end?
Definitely. I think some forms that are learning that are really necessary are having a clear understanding of history. I'm a social studies teacher by trade. It's actually my first year as a social studies teacher. And really, as I've been teaching this past year, thinking about the parallels that exist between history and the present. And it's really hard to understand our present day conditions without understanding our past and understanding the history that we're coming from. And so having a really strong understanding of history, having a strong understanding of the development of the world, and thinking about the larger kind of dynamics of capitalism, of anti-Blackness, and how those things have manifested across time. And when we're really able to make those comparisons between the present and the past, that's I think where we're able to not only like learn from the folks who came before us, from our ancestors, but also think about really innovative ways to like address marginalization in our current society. So I think definitely a strong understanding of history. A lot of things that we see now are like very ahistorical. For example, thinking about the ways in which trans people in our society are like anti-trans legislation that's coming up right now, and thinking about, you know, this idea of being trans or being queer, something that's not inherent or natural. When we look at history, we know that that's not true. When we think about, you know, Black history and how there's legislation, you know, anti-CRT legislation, and thinking about, you know, our society, this country was built on anti-Blackness, was built on slavery, was built on racism, and understanding history allows us to really illuminate that. So I think some forms of education and ways that can occur is through, you know, traditional like reading, you know, reading for Black Lives Project, reading books, reading texts, but also talking to our ancestors, talking to the folks who come before us, and talking to community members, and really learning from one another and learning from our experiences in order to have like a larger understanding of the world around us. When our learning only occurs in a silo, when it only occurs within the pages of a textbook, we can only get so far. It's really when we're talking to our community members that the words on the page actually become enlightened and come to life, and we're actually directly able to, you know, address the issues that we face in our everyday lives that folks are impacted by.
Thank you for that answer. That was incredibly thoughtful. Given the history of Black studies and the roles academic institutions have in barring information and histories of marginalized groups, how do we promote accessibility in learning? And what does learning look like without academic elitism?
Definitely. Ooh, that's a great question. So one thing I'm thinking about, let me just change. One thing I'm thinking about is understanding the fact that learning happens in so many different forms. And as I just said, right, this idea that, you know, just reading a book is not enough. actually engaging with the world around us, that's something that's super critical. I think understanding the fact that the institutions, like academic institutions, have a very, very long history of exclusion, have a very, very long history of actually implementing the structures that marginalize people, thinking about the structures of anti-Blackness, thinking about how many Ivy Leagues were able to get their start through the slave trade, were able to build up their endowments through participating in the sale of human beings, in the sale of African people, of enslaved Africans. And so when we really understand how these institutions themselves are inherently flawed, it really allows us to move past like academic elitism, recognizing the fact that learning can happen in a variety of different ways. One thing I try to implement in my classes and thinking about, moving past the textbook, was thinking about how can art allow us to learn about the world around us? How can photography allow us to learn about the world around us? How can music or poetry or these different forms of sharing and these forms of creation allow us to learn? And so really letting go of this idea that learning only happens when I'm in a classroom in front of a teacher and I'm reading from a textbook or I'm reading from an official source. I mean, really thinking about how each and every one of us are literally a part of, every one of us plays a role in creating history. And history is not something that is bestowed on us, but something that we're actively working to create every single day. And also just kind of taking a step back and recognizing the fact that, a lot of these things are fake. A lot of higher education, a lot of the structures that exist in our society are not real. When we think about like the stock market, sometimes I remember like, wow, like these things play a really big role, but they're numbers that people just made up and assigned value to one day. And when we kind of break that down and recognize that, I think that can help us really move past academic elitism. Oh, my audio dropped.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful question or thoughtful answer. With the rise in digital resources and social media infographics offering a base understanding in theory, especially with Juneteenth being recognized as a federal holiday for just 1 year now, how do we navigate work that centers liberation versus virtue signaling when sharing resources in digital learning overall?
Mm-hmm. This is something I've been thinking about a lot for the past day. As you just said, like Juneteenth is now a national holiday, and the ways in which it's quickly become appropriated. Now Juneteenth is like, wow, like let's get the parties going. And it's like, it's a holiday that's literally commemorating when the last slave people in Galveston, Texas learned that they were actually liberated and free. And so one thing I think about is, how is the work that I'm doing or the things that I'm sharing on social media, how is that changing the lives of Black people that I'm not directly in community with? A lot of times, like we're sharing infographics or, we're sharing posts on social media. And a lot of times I find like that education tends to center non-Black people or tends to center white people and is not necessarily centering the people who are most impacted. When I'm seeing infographics about like racism 101, what is racism? Black people who are impacted by racism are already aware of that. It's really folks who are unaware that are most benefiting from that. So that work is not centering Black people. When we're thinking about Juneteenth specifically, I'm seeing things about like, oh yes, like, BIPOC Juneteenth party, when Juneteenth is specifically a holiday for African American people who are descendants of slaves, and who are directly impacted by the history of slavery in this country. And so thinking about how are we tangibly benefiting Black people, how are we creating tangible change? And so that includes giving money. That includes providing resources. That includes making sacrifices. And so really making sure that, the post I'm sharing this post is giving awareness, but awareness for who? Who benefits from that awareness? And also, how am I impacting Black people that I don't know? a lot of times, we stick with the people that we know, we stick with our communities. And so again, people who have certain access or certain social capital are the ones who are able to most benefit. But how are we benefiting people who don't have social capital? How are we benefiting people who might not have direct access to those resources? And so thinking about people not only that we're directly in community with, but the people that we're hoping to build community with in the future as well.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. And I'd love to invite the voices of our community here. What do actions toward liberation look like in 2022? What worlds are we imagining as of now? And I'd love to add a dimension to this question with respect to some of the things that Fayola has given voice to. How does learning play a role in liberatory action?
I think learning liberty or learning actions towards liberation in 2022, I think, like what Fayola said, is a lot about, education. I think that that's an important first step, because I don't think you can learn, you can't solve problems without knowing about them. You can't solve problems without understanding the depth and breadth of them. And you can't solve problems without knowing and imagining possible solutions, all of which come out of education. I think that that's a big first step. I think there are a lot of other steps that require a lot more power behind them, like a lot of community organizing and things that are a little bit more like specialized skill sets. But education gives you like this really broad basis from which to start with, being like, okay, maybe I'm not good at like public speaking and like organizing people, but I can do childcare, and I can educate children, or I can watch children while the adults are off protesting, or like, whatever you can do to help the movement towards progress and the movement towards liberation. But you can't know that until you know something else. You don't know your worth until you learn about a lot of different stuff. And as far as worlds we're reimagining right now, I feel like I guess I'm coming at this from kind of a perspective as someone who is invested a lot in fiction and a lot of like speculative fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, stuff like that. And I'm really heartened by the kinds of things that we're getting right now, where people are imagining worlds where the certain types of discrimination either don't exist or aren't like a big deal, to where there's like other problems that exist in this world, but like the base problems of that we in this community are like learning how to survive. Like, for example, like I'm watching First Kill right now, and it's this really cheesy like Netflix show about like a black monster hunter and a white vampire, and they fall in love and their families are warring. It's like Romeo and Juliet. But like you have this thing, and then the vampire's best friend is a black gay human. And all of these queer characters, the problem doesn't come from them being queer. The problem comes with one of them being like a supernatural being, and like having to deal with that. Or like there's a lot of more fiction now where we're experiencing these worlds of like there's still realistic problems with that I have realistic comparisons to things that we have to deal with now, but the things that weigh us down and drag us down every single day as a factor of our existence, like racism and homophobia, just don't have that bearing that they do. And it allows people to breathe and to grow and to imagine that they can live in that kind of world. Whereas with things like our racist society, like part of the point is to make you think that that's all there is. that it's always going to be this way, that you're never going to be able to escape it, that like racism is ingrained and it's tribalism and it's expansion of tribalism and it's always going to happen and it's always happened. Like fiction allows us to imagine a world outside of that, and it allows us to hope and strive for a world outside of that. And that's, as a person who writes fiction, like that's really inspiring to me. And I think that that's something that we really need moving forward.
Thanks so much, Mimi, for sharing that. Equiano or Tim, would either of you like to share some reflections on what actions toward liberation look like in 2022? What worlds we're reimagining right now? What's the role of learning and liberation?
Go ahead. That's a really great question, Heather. Thank you so much, Miyako. I completely understand where you're coming from, and thank you so much for kind of outlining that out. I don't know. I think Juneteenth is a very special day, of course. I think there is something for me personally as Tim that's institutionally makes me institutionally aware that Juneteenth is always a look back, right? So it's like always a look back at this particular date. In Galveston, Texas, it's always kind of a commemoration of a delay of freedom. And so it's always a celebration of being tied to an other. It's a celebration of being tied to, emancipation. And so literally by definition of a white existence, we celebrate it and I understand that. But for me, I think that liberation first and foremost can come from loving your neighbor, loving your brother, loving your sister, loving your classmates, loving your teacher, loving your social studies teacher, who's trying to get you to understand how you are maneuvering through this world socially as a human being first. And so I think that that's one off top. And I think when it comes to Juneteenth, it's kind of like this particular program today is kind of commemorating and understanding 10 years since Trayvon Martin, which wasn't that long ago. And then thinking about 10 years to the future. And so for me, liberation for us really lies in how we create a future together. Juneteenth is a respective look back and should be commemorated and federalized into a federal holiday. But as much as we look back and celebrate that day in Galveston, Texas, we need to continue to collectively focus on a future together and what that looks like. And the beginnings of that looks like love to my brother and my sister.
Yeah, beautifully said. I also believe that there's always an importance in looking back in history to see how things might have transpired. But within that searching back, we have to find the nuances of things that really kept us, the things that kept us together, kept us persevering, no matter how hostile the environment was, especially back then. Because I think if we only focus on the, I guess almost like the massive moments that happened, then we're taking away really the hard work that was done on the day-to-day between those massive events, between Juneteenth, between Emancipation Proclamation, between, all the way to first time people were brought over to the Americas, and also, he that I never like to name, but we have to reattach ourselves to the things we do on a daily basis that keep us pushing forward into tomorrow. The rituals that we know that we need to hold on to, senses of joy, senses of purpose, senses of family, senses of love, as Tim has already touched on, senses of community, as Fayola has already touched on, and also senses of storytelling. I think storytelling is a massively important part of healing, ultimately. Like Miyako also touched upon, storytelling and fiction is very important for us to be able to transcend all of these things that we feel on a daily basis. Otherwise, only looking back or only looking to the future, I don't think that's going to be enough. I believe that we need to be mixing this gumbo up with all of these types of ingredients on a daily basis, and really forming a foundation from there at all times.
Thank you so much for both of your answers. I'd also love to reflect on some of the wonderful pieces that we had this month and how those reflect this question of, what actions do we take toward liberation this year? What worlds are we reimagining? One thing I really appreciate about Spilt Milk is it kind of drops us into the messiness of coupledom. Arguments that can kind of arise out of nothing, just like a big old nothing burger of stress. Your pressure's raised, you just upset about something, and then it's literally just about some spilt milk and who didn't get it. And of course, there's this ocean of other concerns underneath. But at the core of it, there actually is a question that really underscores our relationship to liberation, which is our agency over our ability to make choices about our reproductive futures, our ability to make choices about what coupledom looks like, whether it includes some vision of family. That's a fundamentally liberatory question. That's a question that sadly is a battleground right now and has very real consequences for anyone who has a uterus. And what that can look like, literally down to whether or not you can leave certain states if you get pregnant within the borders of that state because of a whole matrix of trigger laws. The next piece, carbon footprint. One of the reasons why I love that piece so much is because it melts together two things that I always look at through the lens of Black justice, which is capitalism and climate change and climate justice. And the fact of the matter is that there are so many capitalist interests that underscore the various machinations of systemic injustice and how they disproportionately bear down on the lived experiences of bodies of color, of queer people and identities, of gender expansive identities. And those capitalist interests also will turn around and then sell you your experience back in a rainbow flag and a Black power fist talking about, hey, remember your grandma's favorite, what did Walmart just do that was disrespectful as shit?
The Juneteenth ice cream?
Yeah.
The red velvet ice cream.
What in the capitalist hot hell? Like, it was like, I know y'all Negroes like red velvet. Let's put this in ice cream and sell it back to you. Like, how do you not feel the flames of hell licking at your asshole when you come up with a decision like that? And then our last
wait, Heather, sorry, not to like distract, but like, did you see the Children's Museum thing with the Juneteenth watermelon salad? The Children's Museum of Indianapolis, Indiana, our home state, made a Juneteenth watermelon salad.
You know what's messed up? So my family actually does make a watermelon salad on Juneteenth and Memorial Day and 4th of July. And
I'm sure it's delicious.
It feels like mockery.
Sure it's delicious, but
it is delicious. But the disrespect. And of course, it's the Children's Museum in Indianapolis. Hot mess. It's frustrating. And then, of course, the last piece, Crack the Door from For Some Air by Dr. Mary Weems, really underscores the tension that I think most Black families have been touched by, regardless of whether or not we've lost a family member due to police violence or any other, unfortunate experience. The experience of worry for someone who is Black and you're watching the minutes tick by is a distinct experience in the United States. The experience of wondering, where is a young Black man? Their curfew is this time. I wonder what the people around them are doing. When I think about actions toward liberation in 2022, I reflect on this idea kind of core to BRTW's name and function, Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop. Revolution as a means to a liberatory and equitable end. those means cannot just be the means by which we hold people accountable, but recreate the function of a society in which so many people are taught that the only way to get from point A to point B is suffering. That is a disproportionately terrible experience. It should not be so commonplace that when you have a short piece about wondering where a Black child is, instantly the expectation is a body bag. That is built into American experience. There should be so much distance between a young Black man's life and missing curfew and the expectation that some harm has befallen him. So yeah, when I think about actions toward liberation, I think about, as Miyako so beautifully brought up, education, as Tim and Equiano were talking about, were love and our attitudes towards one another. And I love this kind of blend of like what we do to enrich ourselves and our own resources as we can engage in those liberatory actions, and also how we can engage in community care. And I think mutual aid is absolutely a fundamental piece of this puzzle. I would love us also to think about an awareness of our own capacity of when we can kind of speak truth to power and when we take care of ourselves. Both of those things, certainly in communities at the margins, communities that have been specifically and intentionally positioned at the margins of a society, both of those sets of actions are going to be liberatory and fundamental to the experience of creating a more equitable future. And in terms of what worlds are we reimagining as of now, I hope it's not such a stretch of the imagination that we can imagine a world where we decouple the American marginalized, historically marginalized experience from the interests of capital, from the interests of a white supremacist longitudinal vision of the society, from the interests of a war state, from the interests of imperialism, from the interests of entrenched colonialism. And by doing that work, decoupling even internally what we think of as being fundamentally related to one other thing. What does it mean when we decouple being in contact with a loved one from slave labor a continent away? What does it look like when we decouple our interest in another society from neo-plantation labor in Hawaii? I think if we ask ourselves those questions, we can not just reimagine, but we can be active and equitable citizens in that better world. I'd love to turn it back to Fayola. What do actions toward liberation look like in 2022? What world are you reimagining right now?
I'm reimagining a world where all of our basic needs are more than fulfilled. Imagining a world where we can all thrive rather than barely surviving. And imagining a world where death and cruelty are not things that are inherent to our society. I mean, death is inherent, but in the ways in which, at least in the United States, where sometimes I feel we live in a death cult, where death is both one thing that feels ever present, especially as a Black person, feels ever present, but we're never given space or time or energy to actually process the deaths that we're constantly experiencing of people that we know and people that we don't know. The ways in which I'm trying to reimagine that world is thinking about like the small ways that I can resist in like my everyday life. So sometimes, honestly, like coming to work late and reclaiming my time in that way. Thinking about the ways like when people ask me for money on the street, like freely giving money and not worrying about are they going to use it to buy drugs or buy alcohol, recognizing the fact that people have agency over their bodies, and because someone is in need does not mean that they no longer have that agency. Thinking about, the mutual aid work that I do and like just giving out free books, right? This idea that you don't need to earn a book, you don't need to swap a book. You are here, you are present, that you have every right to this book. And so just really thinking about those small ways that I can kind of subvert the expectations that we have in our society. And thinking about the things that like, is this like actually a rule or is this like propaganda that I've been force fed? Is something that I need to unlearn. So those are the ways I'm trying to get to to this new world that we're all trying to envision together.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm definitely going to borrow and give you credit for it when I say it out loud, but is this a real rule or is this propaganda that I've been force-fed? Is such a wonderful invitation to think deeply and critically. Before we close out this evening, first, I just want to wish everyone in our community a happy Juneteenth. It definitely has this aspect of a sorrowful look back that Tim, beautifully invited us to remember. And I hope with that look back, it also invites us to reimagine a future where people are not being informed that actually they've been free for a minute. Fayola, closing words. What action items would you like everyone joining us to pursue and why?
I think some action items that I want folks to be engaging with is the practice of mutual aid and a sense of distributing money. I think we live in a capitalist society, and a lot of times lack of access is really just lack of access to money and to funds. And so I really, really recommend, like, on Instagram, there are a number of different organizations, for example, like For the Girls, AIDS to Mama, like that does AIDS to Mamas that does mutual aid work and is working with individuals who need support, who need financial support. And so access to housing, access to food, like that's all about money. And so giving money to people regularly, freely, without expectation, without asking people to beg, without asking people to perform trauma, and to make sure that people are getting their needs met. And so I highly recommend, I also on like Reading for Black Lives, and on Instagram, I'm always sharing like mutual aid posts. So figuring out like where can you find those posts, how can you donate to people that are in need, and doing that in a way that is sustainable and regular. And I think that that's definitely an action item that I have for folks today. Give Black people your money. That's the action item.
Thank you so much. And how can people stay up to date with what you're doing?
Yes, I'm mostly on Instagram through Reading for Black Lives. That's our Instagram page. That's where I post information about book lists as well as different community pop-ups. This past weekend, I was actually at the Building Black Bedside Marketplace on Tompkins Ave in front of Sincerely Tommy at 343 Tompkins Ave. And I'll be there next week as well, Saturday and Sunday from 12 to 2:30, giving out books. So please come pull up on me. I always have books, bookmarks, and good vibes. And yeah, that's mostly where keep up with me and the work that I'm doing. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And that reminds me to remind our audiences, stay up to date with us on the social medias. We'll also be having pop-up write-ins around the city. Those are going to be spaces that are prioritizing Black creative people having a safe space to gather. So if you show up and you're just there for the golden oat latte, maybe share some space for Black creatives who need a free and creative space so that they can generate the next master work. With that, we're going to sign off.
Bye. Happy Pride.